The law of fear. Fear is the oldest form of control known to mankind. Long before money, laws, or religion, fear alone kept tribes in line. It is invisible, yet suffocating. Irrational, yet deeply biological. It is the chain that needs no lock, because the prisoner holds it willingly. But here's the terrifying truth. Fear doesn't just live in dictatorships, prisons, or cults. It lives inside your workplace, your relationships, and even inside your own mind. In this video, we step into the roots of fear, how it is planted, how it spreads, and why it still rules you, even when you think you're free. To understand why fear is the perfect weapon, we must look at the human brain. When fear strikes your amygdala, the brain's alarm system hijacks everything. Logic shuts down, critical thinking collapses. Fight, flight, or freeze, those are your only options. This is why fear is so effective. It doesn't ask for obedience, it demands it. Your biology already surrenders. Fear amplifies your loss aversion, the human tendency to avoid pain at all costs. It feeds your authority bias, trusting leaders even when they're dangerous. It enforces learned helplessness, convincing you that resistance is futile. These biases are not abstract theories. They are the very levers pulled by tyrants, cult leaders, and manipulators. In ancient Mesopotamia, kings declared themselves chosen by the gods, but divine authority wasn't enough. They made fear visible. Public executions weren't just punishment, they were theater. A staged reminder that resistance meant annihilation. Entire cities were kept obedient, not through loyalty, but through the terror of what happened to those who defied. This pattern repeats across history, The Roman Empire fed Christians to lions in arenas. The Mongol armies left piles of skulls as warnings. Medieval lords burned witches at the stake. Fear is always more efficient than persuasion. Convince 1,000 men, and you must work tirelessly. Torrify them, and they convince themselves. Notice something chilling. Fear doesn't just shape obedience in empires and wars. It seeps into daily life, into families, into workplaces. The same psychological mechanics that controlled peasants and slaves are quietly shaping your choices today. You felt it, hesitation before speaking out, the silent weight of what might happen if you defy someone in power. That silence, that hesitation, that is obedience born of fear. Consider the Salem witch trials, hundreds of people accused of witchcraft. Most were innocent. Why did entire communities participate? Fear of the unknown, fear of damnation, fear of being the next accused. Once fear enters a group, it spreads like wildfire. People don't just obey out of terror. They become enforcers themselves. Neighbors betrayed neighbors. Children accused their parents. Entire towns descended into paranoia. And here is the dark truth. Fear doesn't just suppress opposition. It creates unity through hatred of a common enemy. It bonds people together while destroying them from within. Now let's step into the modern world. Imagine living under a dictator. You are not beaten, you are not imprisoned, but you know. Eyes are everywhere. Neighbors are informants. The wrong word, even whispered, could vanish you overnight. You don't need chains, because your mind builds its own prison. This is the invisible cage of fear. A control system so effective, the dictator barely needs to lift a finger. Silence itself becomes obedience. And here's the frightening part. This same cage exists outside dictatorships. In corporate environments, the fear of losing your job silences innovation. In families, fear of rejection silences truth. In relationships, fear of abandonment silences individuality. Fear doesn't need bars. It just needs your imagination to do the work. Fear works because it bypasses logic. It is primal. Psychologists call this anticipatory fear, the terror of what might happen, even if it never does. And here's the trap. Anticipatory fear can be more powerful than actual punishment. A dictator doesn't need to execute everyone, just a few publicly. The rest live in perpetual dread. An abusive parent doesn't need to scream every day, just enough times that silence itself feels dangerous. A manipulative partner doesn't need to threaten constantly, just a few sharp words keep you walking on eggshells forever. Fear is efficient, fear is cheap, fear is sustainable. So, let me ask you this. When was the last time fear silenced you? Was it at work? When you stayed quiet? In a meeting? In your family? When you bit your tongue instead of speaking truth? Or in your own mind when you told yourself it's safer not to try? That is the law of fear, the obedience you never agreed to, but live by every day. Next, we will step deeper into the machinery of obedience. We'll see how fear is manufactured on a massive scale, how it shapes corporations, how it controls nations, and how without realizing it, it may already be shaping you. Now we uncovered the roots of fear, how it hijacks the brain, shapes obedience, and chains entire societies without ever lifting a weapon. But now we move into something darker, the machinery of obedience. Because fear alone is raw power, but power becomes unstoppable when it is systematized, scaled, and refined. This is where fear turns from an instinct into an industry. Every dictatorship, every manipulative corporation, every cult uses propaganda as the delivery system of fear. Propaganda is not just about lies, it's about amplifying uncertainty. In Nazi Germany, fear propaganda painted Jews as invisible enemies, infiltrating every corner of society. During the Cold War, governments on both sides broadcast endless warnings of nuclear annihilation. Even in advertising, fear sells you this product or risk being ugly, unsafe, unloved. Fear-based propaganda works because it primes the amygdala before the rational brain can respond. It bypasses thought, creating reflexive obedience. And the most sinister part? Once fear becomes your daily background noise, you no longer need to be convinced. You obey instinctively. In the Einschaltbeit censors, Hitler's regime perfected fear as a system. The Gestapo didn't need to knock on every door. They relied on whispers, neighbors turning in neighbors. Fear was embedded into culture, posters warning of traitors, schools teaching children to report their parents, radio broadcasts saturating homes with constant reminders of danger. The brilliance and horror was that the people themselves became enforcers. This is the self-policing loop of fear. When fear is everywhere, everyone becomes both prisoner and warden. And this pattern repeats in corporations, cults, and toxic families. The manipulator doesn't need to watch you. You watch yourself. Now let's bring this closer to home. Fear is not only a weapon of dictators, it thrives in boardrooms. Think about the last time you worked in a corporation. Fear of losing your job kept you from speaking out. Fear of humiliation kept you from challenging the boss. Fear of being not a team player kept you silent when the company made unethical choices. This is corporate obedience, a polished, modern dictatorship. The punishments are subtle: loss of promotions, exclusion, financial insecurity. But the effect is the same: silence, compliance, obedience. Notice the pattern, whether in empires, cults, or companies. Fear is standardized. It's no longer just about the whip, the prison, or the gun. It's about systems that keep people afraid even when no one is watching. That's the genius of fear. It becomes invisible, and once invisible, it becomes unescapable. North Korea is perhaps the most chilling modern example. Children are taught from birth to fear foreign powers, traitors, and even their own thoughts. Every home has radios wired to government channels, unable to be turned off. Every street corner has posters warning all spies. Every citizen knows one truth: loyalty is survival, doubt is death. And yet, most North Koreans believe they are free. This is the final form of fear, when obedience feels like choice. The cage no longer needs bars when the prisoner believes the cage is protection. But don't be deceived into thinking fear is only political. In toxic families, fear is weaponized just as effectively. A child silenced by the fear of punishment, a spouse controlled by the fear of abandonment, siblings turned against each other by fear of favoritism. Family-based fear is the most insidious of all because it feels personal. It's not a dictator in uniform. It's someone who claims to love you, but the psychology is identical. Fear rewires obedience, and obedience feels like. Psychologists studying obedience, most famously Stanley Milgram in the Each and Joe by Lickishers, proved how quickly fear shapes compliance. In his experiment, ordinary people were ordered to deliver electric shocks to strangers. 2/3 obeyed, even when they believed they were causing serious harm. Why? Because authority plus fear overrides morality. People feared conflict, they feared standing out, they feared punishment. The conclusion was terrifying. You don't need evil people to commit evil acts, you just need ordinary people. Under the spell of fear. So we now see fear not as a moment, but as a machine fueled by propaganda, polished by corporations, perfected by dictators, and disguised in families. It is everywhere. It is silent, and it is efficient. But here's the question that will shape the final act. If fear is the most powerful weapon of obedience, can it be resisted? Can a human being ever break free? Next, we will walk into the heart of resistance. How to dismantle fear's machinery. How to see the invisible cage, and how to reclaim the one thing fear always tries to steal: your freedom of mind. The machine of fear is vast. It feeds on silence, obedience, and the illusion of safety. But history whispers a hidden truth. No matter how powerful the system, no matter how terrifying the punishment, there are always those who break free. From dissidents under dictatorships, to whistleblowers in corporations, to children who grow up in homes of control and still choose their own voice. This is their story, the story of resistance, and resistance begins not with rebellion, but with awareness. Psychologists agree the first step in dismantling fear is naming it. Fear thrives in vagueness. It whispers, "Oh, something bad will happen. Stay silent, don't move." But once you ask, "What exactly am I afraid of?" you cut its power in half. Fear of rejection, fear of loss, fear of punishment. Write them down. Speak them aloud. Because once fear is named, it is no longer a shadow. It is something you can face. Science shows courage is not the absence of fear. It's action in the presence of fear. When fear strikes, the amygdala fires, your heart races, muscles tense. But here's the secret. You can train your brain to reinterpret these signals. The pounding heart? Not danger. Energy. The trembling hand? Not weakness. Activation, the adrenaline rush? Not a warning. Fuel. Elite soldiers, athletes, and activists all use this reframing technique. They don't fight fear, they ride it, and that shift turns panic into power. December 1, 1955. Montgomery, Alabama, Rosa Parks was not fearless. She was afraid of arrest, of retaliation, of violence. But when the bus driver ordered her to give up her seat, she did something revolutionary. She felt fear and acted anyway. Her single act of defiance ignited a movement. Millions followed. Laws changed. Nations shifted. Her story proves the truth. Fear cannot be erased, but it can be outlived, outspoken, outdone. To resist fear, you must build what psychologists call psychological immunity. This means training your mind to recognize manipulation, building a support system of allies who validate your reality, practicing small acts of defiance daily so resistance becomes muscle memory. It's the same principle as a vaccine. Expose yourself to small doses of fear. Learn to endure. Learn to recover. So when the larger storm comes, you are ready. Consider whistleblowers, those who expose corruption inside powerful corporations or governments. At first, they obey the system like everyone else, but over time, the weight of silence becomes unbearable. When they speak out, they face everything: lawsuits, threats, exile, public humiliation. Yet, many survive and even thrive because they build psychological immunity. They seek allies. They prepare for retaliation. They anchor themselves in a cause greater than fear. Their courage reveals the formula. You cannot erase fear, but you can choose your master, fear or truth. Fear is strongest when you believe you are alone. But when people unite, fear cracks. Dictatorships collapse when the silent majority decides to speak. Abusive households lose power when victims find support networks. Toxic corporations crumble when insiders band together. Collective resistance transforms fear from a prison into a spark. Because fear, shared, becomes fuel. This is why leaders who thrive on fear isolate their followers, cutting them off from other voices. But once connection is restored, obedience dies. In the end, the greatest weapon against fear is not courage, but authorship. Fear is a script written for you. Stay quiet, stay small, stay obedient. But you hold the pen. You can rewrite. I may be afraid, but I will speak. I may be trembling, but I will move. Every act of rewriting the script weakens the machine, until one day the machine no longer runs you. You run yourself. So here is the law of fear. Fear shapes obedience, fear chains societies, fear builds invisible prisons. But fear is not final, it is not eternal, and it is not unbreakable. The moment you name it, the moment you face it, the moment you act despite it, you shatter its illusion. This was the law of fear, how fear shapes obedience. If fear can control entire nations, imagine how it might be controlling you right now. Share this if you refuse to stay silent. What terrifies you most? Losing freedom, losing control, or losing yourself? Comment below. They want you quiet. They want you obedient. Prove them wrong. Hit like if you see through the illusion. This is just the beginning. The next episode reveals how grandiosity builds empires even fear can't control. Subscribe before it drops. Stay awake. Stay unafraid. And remember, fear is only as strong as your silence.